All right. Welcome back to the Low Bottom High Rise podcast with me, your host, Moira Casaba. And I have Dr. Elia in the house today. We are both very excited about where this conversation is going to go today. But let me give you a little background. So, Dr. Elia is the author of the #1 Amazon bestselling book. You have to get it: 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, as well as 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, a practical guide to emotionally dealing with pandemics and other disasters. Listen to this. This is when I knew like he was my people. He is the president of the Happiness Center and the founding partner at the Global Institute of Thought Leadership. I just know that. I mean, as soon as I even read that and I've gone down the whole rabbit hole, I'm like, you are my people. I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait for this conversation. And I can't wait to just see not only where this conversation goes, but where this meeting goes, because you are doing such incredible work in the world and have for such a long time. And I'm so grateful to have you here today. So thank you for being on the show.
It's my pleasure, and I'm excited. Let's go.
Let's go. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Dr. Elia, we have so many things. I mean, our teams are kind of emailing back and forth, and we can go into all of these different topics. You have so much expertise in so many different areas. But can you give me a little bit of the backstory? Like, how did this journey begin for you? How did you end up doing this kind of work in the world?
Thank you. So, I was born in Athens, Greece, but, a great country. But our family moved to Santa Monica, California when I was 10, partly because my mom got cancer at the time. And my mom, to this day, is the most influential person in my life, even though she's been gone for almost 40 years.
Wow.
This October, it's the 40th anniversary of her passing.
Wow. So
So,
she
back in
passed
the
away. You
day,
were young.
I was really young. Yeah. I mean, when she
Yeah.
got cancer, I was only 10.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
and in Greece back in those days, that was pretty much a death sentence.
Yeah.
So my parents moved to Southern California, UCLA Medical Center,
Mhm.
really in an attempt to prolong her life, which it did, because she lived another 12 years. I mean, she got
Wow.
cancer when she was 39, and she died when she was 51.
Wow.
But at least I had my mom long enough through all those, pivotal developmental years, my teenage years. I mean, she actually got to see me graduate from UCLA. Actually, I graduated when I was 21.
Wow.
Um, it's a side story. My brother got his master's at UCLA at the same time. My mom is too sick to attend graduation, so we both actually went to the hospital. I'm dressed with a cap and gown and so on, and she looked at us from her bed, and she said, "This is what I've lived for,
Oh,
because I
wow.
know now you two are going to be just fine." And really, it wasn't but a few months later that she passed away. But I think she held on to life to fulfill her role as a mom, to see us to get to a certain point,
Yeah.
and then transition out. And people
And
say, well, how did you become a happiness expert? So this actually relates to back to that time with my mom. The last words she said to me before she died, literally the last words were this. She says, "My boy, just like he says, don't worry about me. I'm going to be just fine. I just want you to be happy."
mm,
End quote. And then she died,
yeah.
like within a couple of days, but she didn't speak after that.
And then you
So
go on to
obviously,
become a happiness expert. You're like, "Mom, I will fulfill this desire of yours for sure."
but for the first year, my mom was unconditional love personified. She was not loved by men and women. She was beloved, which is
Mm,
a whole different feeling too, because her heart was so open. She loved everybody. And
wow.
I've inherited that. I feel like, my wife says, how do you love so many people so big? How do you
Yeah.
show up so big for so many people constantly? And I'm like, you know what? It's easy. Because I feel like I have this river of love that flows from the heavens from my mom. It goes through me, and I'm able
Oh,
to, like, and that's my legacy.
yeah.
Like my mom lives through me in a lot of ways.
Wow.
But the first year after she passed away, of course, I was just devastated. Like my whole family imploded. My older brother, in his own grief, he takes off. My dad starts smoking and drinking even more in his grief.
Yeah.
And I'm the youngest, so I was kind of left like I went from having this great family to nothing. Like it
Mm,
blew up.
wow.
So for the first year, honestly, Moira, I didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't want to exist. How's that?
Yeah.
I'm like, God, if I get hit by a bus today,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. So as long as I can be with my mom.
Yeah.
And then on the 1 year anniversary, something happened to me, which was so profound that led to who I am today. Something snapped. Because anniversaries are really hard
Hmm.
when you lose loved ones. And I remember her parting words to me. And I'm like, you know what? The best way to honor mama is to be happy.
Mm.
And I switched, like something happened, and I went a different path. And then I decided to go back to graduate school, get my PhD. Have this amazing private practice, full people on waiting list with never marketing or anything. Was because I poured my love into people so
Yeah.
big, and I believe we're all given certain gifts,
Yeah.
and when we use our gifts, they grow. And if we don't, they and one of the gifts that I've always had that is to be able to see what's good in people, what's the best in people,
Hmm.
like who is their higher self long
Yes.
before they can see it in themselves.
Yes.
Long
Yes.
before. Like I used to have addicts. I mean, I did a lot of addictions. I mean, my dissertation was on Alcoholics Anonymous, actually.
Wow.
So actually, it
Wow.
was very weird
See, I
that
knew you
actually they
were
gave
my
me,
people.
yeah, they gave me access. Imagine AA giving you access to write a dissertation, do a study, which is unique. It's
Unheard
never
of.
happened
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So I would have a lot of patients that would come in and, hey, my name is John and I'm an alcoholic or whatever. I'm a drug addict. First session, I'm like, actually, you're not. They're like, what? I'm like, no, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a friend, you have your professional career, you're a son and a nephew and so on. So yes, you do have an addiction, and it definitely is kicking your butt and is destroying your life in a lot of ways, but that's not who you are.
Right.
And initially, people was like, I don't think you understand addictions. I don't think you know what you're talking about. I'm like, no, I see so much more in you than you, because they couldn't see that in themselves because they were
Right.
judging themselves through their acting out.
Yes. Yes.
Low self esteem, low self worth, beating themselves
Hmm.
up, huge inner critic. And I
Hmm.
was able to pull back the lenses and say, no, you're so much more than that. Now let's get to work. Let's get you sober and let you get on a different path. When we would finish, it was the exit interview, which was always very moving. And like would like see them and they would hug and would like crying like you saw me before I could see it in myself. I'm like, I
Yes.
know. I told you that. Do you remember that last year when we talked the first? He goes, but I didn't believe you when you said that because I've never seen myself in that light. So I've been able to do that my whole life for
Isn't
thousands,
that
tens of thousands of people.
isn't that the biggest gift we can give somebody? I think that and now I know, you know how you feel the connection before you understand the connection. I also have that gift, and it took me like even a lot of work to even figure out like what kind of my superpower was, and it's believing in other people. I just have an uncanny ability to see the higher version, to believe in people, and I always say just borrow my belief because I believe it. You don't believe it, I get it. It makes sense that you don't believe it, but believe in my belief, right? Borrow that. And it's so powerful. And so here's a question that I have for you as you're speaking, because I can relate to it so well. Do you think that we had to find that belief in ourselves before we were able to find it in other people?
You know what? No one has ever asked me that.
Yeah.
That I've never been, and I do like 3 podcasts a week for the whole like nobody has ever asked. That's a very interesting question. I've always had a good relationship with myself
Yeah.
because I have to give credit to my mom because of that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
clearly like I felt like so unconditionally loved by her. So and we all have our ups and downs. I mean, moving to the United States at the age of 10, I withdrew. I became very shy. I pulled back because number one, I was sort of a perfectionist. I was afraid I have a weird name. My English wasn't perfect. Like I didn't want to make any mistakes. So I pulled back. I wasn't really myself. But then something magical happened
Yeah.
because I was like seventh grade. Like middle school is hard.
Oof.
In
Yeah.
middle school, you come from a small country like Greece to the United States. It's a major transition. But I happened to be a really good swimmer, like I was a national champion in Greece. So we get to Santa Monica, my first swimming event. So back in those days, middle school was seventh, eighth, and ninth grade.
Yeah.
So and I was a seventh grader. First week, I swim and I break the school record, like even for ninth graders. Like I was faster than seventh and ninth graders. So what happens if, especially as back then, when you're an athlete, now all of a sudden the kids start to see you differently. You're not that
Mhm.
weird kid with a weird name, with a weird accent and so on. Now you're like, you're the best at something.
Mm.
And I think sports and swimming helped me to not just feel good about myself. It shaped who I was in a different way.
Yeah.
Not that I won every race, but and I have all my swimming, all the national champions are here on the wall here.
I
But
love
there's
that.
as many gold and bronze as I have gold.
Mm.
Silver, bronze, and gold. They're not all gold,
Right.
which teaches you about life, right?
Mhm.
And my dad, in spite of his, my dad was tough. He taught me several. One of the things is when you win, be humble and grateful.
Mhm.
When you lose, and by lose he meant you didn't get the gold medal. Like you could finish
Right.
second. Like
Yes, I knew where that was going.
if you ain't first, you're last, like the movie said. He would say to me, now you go and congratulate the guy that beat you. You do it.
Yeah.
Right. So it just taught me a lot about life in a lot of
Mm.
ways. But I think it shaped my self-worth, not just my mom's love necessarily, but when you win, when you're the national champion of something, that does help,
Yeah.
you know.
I think also what you're speaking to so profoundly is, I mean, you've said it in different areas, right? The addict who is more than their addiction. A part of them is addicted, not the whole. Even when we say like, I'm so angry, it's like we can diffuse that by saying, well, actually a part of me is angry, like just a part.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying too is a part of you was insecure and shy, but a part of you was a champion swimmer, right?
Right.
And as a child, you had probably because you were so unconditionally loved, you were able to kind of hold on to the champion swimmer identity part of you and find confidence in that, find belief in that. And I think that probably just happened by default as a child. We don't really know what we're doing, but we as adults and teachers now know that we can actually teach people how to do that, right? A part of me is unorganized, but a part of me is actually very type A and super organized. So it's like, well, which identity am I picking up and choosing to be? And we have the freedom to choose that. So this goes back to there's a part in your book that speaks to this identity piece. You call it, I can't remember what you called it in the book. I always call it identity. You called it something else.
Purpose. I mean, and I also knew my purpose early on in life too. So those are two different. Those are two things that happened. Mom's unconditional love, obviously, but younger than that, I'm a 5-year-old boy. This is in Greece still. Like, and my grandpa, whose name was Elia, and I honor, and I just lived in him. He was an amazing grandpa, but he died when I was 6. So I don't have a lot of memories of him, but I have this one memory that actually is probably the most profound lesson that I learned over time. He sat me on his lap, and I didn't know he was dying, but he was very playful and lighthearted. He said, "My boy," he said, "you want to know a secret?" And I'm like, "Yes, Grandpa." You're, you
Yeah.
know, do you want to be the richest man in the world? And I'm like, yes, Grandpa. Like,
I
yeah.
love it. I
I
love
mean,
it.
like, well, I mean, he hooked me basically.
Yeah.
That if you want to be the richest man in the world, do something good for somebody else every day,
Oh,
and you will be the richest man in the world.
mm,
Now think about how profound that's. Now my 5-year-old little brain somehow,
yeah.
okay, do something good for somebody else, and I'll be the richest man in the world. Obviously, at the time, I
You
thought you were going to be
actually
like
thought,
rich by
yeah.
like money, like.
Right, right.
But you know what he meant? What he meant,
Yeah.
be kind every day. So I started thinking, and I've been like a kindness advocate and a kindness giver in some ways my entire life. I
Mm,
look to do something good for somebody else every day,
yeah.
and it's effortless, by the way. I mean, it's second nature. It's who I am. So if you go to the grocery store and somebody's, like, look at their tag and say, Moira, I hope you're having a good day.
Yeah.
Make eye contact with them. Break a smile. I hope your day goes well by name.
Yeah.
What did that cost me? Nothing. I'm just paying for the. It doesn't cost anything to be kind.
Yeah. And it's contagious, right? It's so contagious. I had this thought just yesterday. I was out to lunch with my daughter, and when we got up, I was just talking to our waitress. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it was so good. We're going to be in here once a week. You'll see us back next week." I was just, I mean, I was just talking to her, and my daughter started engaging in conversation, and I thought, it's contagious. She's learning. I wasn't trying to be an
But you're
example.
modeling the behavior.
Right, right. And it's so easy. And most people are just walking around like robots, caught up in our negativity. You know, one of the things I wrote down while I was reading your book, because I am definitely like the eternal optimist. You know, my family kind
Same,
of makes
same.
fun
Yeah.
of me. Every time I talk about a new restaurant, my brother gives me a hard time. He's like, let me guess, it was the best. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so positive. But good morning, God, right? The optimist wakes up and says, good morning, God. And the pessimist says,
Good
oh,
God, it's morning.
good God, it's morning. So good. It's
So
so
good.
good. And it's such just a gut check of like, how are we waking up in the morning, right? And I love that. And go back, we've shared this little story because I thought it was so powerful, going back to kind of what you're talking about, your early identity and what the nurse said to your dad when you were in the nursery.
Oh, well, that's a okay. That's the first lesson, actually. This is the
Yeah.
personal brand, right? So,
That's right.
a
You
long
call
time
it, so
ago,
that's what it was. I call it identity. You're calling it personal brand, which I
personal brand.
love.
Yeah. And, back in the day, like nobody was invited in the birthing room. There's no Snapchat, there's no Instagram Live, there's nothing like that. It was just my mom and the OBGYN. So when I came out, my dad comes up to this little window. They're like five little babies, I guess. They're all wrapped up in the same white generic blanket back in the day. We all look the same. Tough guy, smoking, drinking his way. Which one's my son? And I guess I had a smile on my face at the time. So the nurse turns to my dad and goes, your son, he's the happy one.
Mhm.
And I grew up being told that story over and over again in my home. Like, well, you're the happy one. You came out of the womb happy. Now, fast forward 25 years, because this is really important about personal branding. I'm in graduate school, and our professor is talking to us about nature versus nurture.
Mhm.
In other words, is it our genetic predisposition that our makeup or our environment? Well, the
Right.
truth is it's both. But I had this terrible thought. I'm like, wait a minute. What if my dad shows up like 15 minutes late? He got caught in traffic. He shows up, same nurse, same thing. And at that point, I have stomach pains and I'm screaming my head off, my
Yeah.
red face and all that stuff. And the nurse turned to my dad, your son, he's the cranky one.
Yes.
And now my family tells me as I'm growing up, well,
Yeah.
you came out of the womb cranky, you miserable little beep,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Right.
So we have all been branded or identity, like you call it. Some brands are positive brands. Like obviously the happy one is at the top of the list. What a great brand to have. But there are other ones. The beautiful one, the creative one, the princess, the intelligent one, um, the athletic one, the kind one, the loving one. There are a lot of brands that, and if you have one of those growing up, because I once go back and think about what was my brand.
Mhm.
If you have one of those positive ones, count your blessings. Thank God that you have them.
Yeah.
However, the truth of the matter is, and having worked with thousands of people, both as a psychologist and as a coach over the last 35 years, unfortunately, some brands are really negative.
Right.
I mean, painful.
Yeah.
I will tell you the three most common ones: the stupid one, the ugly one, and the fat one.
Oh,
Now, you might say, who would actually say that? Trust me, I know
a lot of
people
people.
who grew up with that. So my why I share the story about personal brand is it's a call to action. If you don't like your brand now as an adult, you have the power to change your brand
Yes.
and live into another brand that you aspire, you take in. So about I don't know about 10 years ago, I'm giving a talk in North Carolina at a women's conference, 500 women and me. And I'm talking about this personal brand. And I get to the story. And just as I said, call to action to the audience, there's a lady off to the left in her 70s, gray hair,
Mhm.
who gets up and starts doing this. Like she starts waving her arms. And I'm like, she threw me off because I'm like, I give talks all the time and I'm good at it. But I'm like, the audience is looking at her. They're looking at me. I can't ignore her.
Right.
Like I get, so I stop my talk. I'm like, yes, ma'am. She turns in front of everybody else. It says, after listening to you for 70 years, I've had
Wow.
the brand 70 plus years of being all three of the things you talked about. I was called fat, stupid, and ugly, and a couple of F bombs to go with it. Now, first of all, Moira, between you and I don't think I would have the courage to actually say that in public in front of all those people. I
Right.
give her a lot of
Right.
kudos for sharing that. I don't know if I
Absolutely.
could share that in front of her. It's so painful.
Yeah.
Now you can hear a pin drop in the audience. It got so quiet. They're looking at me. I'm looking at her. They're looking at me for like 4 or 5 seconds. And I was like, okay, it kind of threw me off a little bit. And I don't get thrown off very often. And I'm like, ma'am, okay. And her name was Leah, by the way. It's important that her first name. I said, well, what would you like your new brand to be? And she goes, well, from now on, I want to be known as Princess Leia, kind of like Star Wars.
Yeah.
So as soon as she says that, I turn to her and I'm like, yes, Your Majesty. And I bowed down like this. And people cracked up. People started laughing. So a very serious, a very intense moment became a playful and lighthearted moment and so on. Why I share this story with you and your audience is this. If a 70-plus-year-old woman can
Yeah.
change her brand,
Mhm.
then that means you can do it too. If you don't
Yes.
like your brand, today's your day. You have the power to change your brand and live into that brand. That's why that's really important. Obviously, the happy brand would like, what a great brand. I've lived into that for 60 years. I'm like,
Yeah.
why not? It's a great
Right.
brand. But most people don't have that. They have others.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm even thinking about, and what I love about your work and how you teach and your books is you're just constantly going back to your own personal life, right? I'm constantly reflecting on some of the stories that I got, some of the identity, the personal branding, and some of them were amazing and some of them were not that amazing, right? Like when I was reading the book, I was thinking, gosh, my mom used to always say, I don't know how you do it, but you always land on your feet. Or she would say it to other people. She always lands on her feet. She always pulls it off in the long run. She could run General Motors. I used to hear that all the time. She could run General Motors. But then just now I was thinking, wait a second. My mom has also told me the story many times that I was stoic and I just didn't smile as a child. So I'm like, wait, I need to shift that story, right? But
That's
here's
an
the
interesting brand because Stoicism is by itself is not it's not a bad brand. First of all, I've never heard of it being stoic. I've never heard of any parent call their kid stoic. That's actually another first.
a
That's,
couple
you know,
firsts here.
but you're so lighthearted and so positive and so on. So you're the antithesis of stoicism. You don't come to
Mhm.
me. You don't come across. I don't buy that brand anymore, I guess.
Right. But this is why I want to use that as an example is I always teach a philosophy that I call contrast giving you clarity, right? The negative giving you the positive. Sometimes these stories, these brands that have been put on us, we have the power to use that also as fuel to do the exact opposite, to run in the other direction. And I just want to make sure anyone listening to this isn't thinking, well, gosh, he had such an idyllic childhood. Well, gosh, Moira had such an
No, no,
idyllic
no, no. My
childhood.
mom got cancer when I was 10 and his dad was
Right.
22. Yes, it was idyllic in some ways, but tragic in a lot of other ways.
Yes,
So
but you chose to use the tragedy to create beauty. You chose to take the personal branding that served you, right? And I've done the same thing. I've chosen what served me and I've created the new, right?
I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your brand now? You're not stoic. That's not true anymore. There's no way you're not a stoic. What's your brand now? What would you say is your brand? Your
my
personal brand?
my
How do you
personal
see yourself?
brand. I mean, I
Yes.
really do see myself as just a believer in people. Like I'm a belief builder. If I had to say I am a belief builder. I am passionate, I'm full of energy. I mean, I just want to one of the things that's funny because I was thinking about this too while you were speaking. I always wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. Like since as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. And I didn't end up going that path, which caused a lot of pain for probably a couple decades. I'm totally at peace with it now. But going back to, remember how you said you always knew what you wanted to be, you always knew your purpose? What I finally uncovered was I always wanted to make people feel better. I mean, it almost brings me to
You are a
tears to
doctor,
think
though.
about
I'm
it.
going to disagree with you.
Mm,
You're a doctor of souls.
yeah,
You're a doctor of souls.
thank you.
You don't need a medical degree or a PhD for that. You're a doctor of souls because you see people and you have your sphere of influence. This is what I said before we got on the air that how proud I am of you
Oh,
is
thank you.
because through your own trauma, through your own experiences, you have not only overcome them, but leaned into being such a beautiful example to so many people, like hundreds, millions of people as a result of who you are and what you do. And the fact that you and I have that in common, we can see the best now that you're
Yeah.
a doctor of souls. That's
Wow.
who you
Thank
are.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That means the world. And, like I said, it can create if we're not looking at it from the right perspective, right? You talk about this again in the book. if you're not looking at it through kind of the right lens, it can appear to be a negative, right? And good gosh, one of the biggest turning points in my life was living in recovery for 15 plus years as I am an alcoholic. It identified me as a whole because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but
Yeah.
I believed that if I forgot that, I would pick up and I would use and I would die. And my
Not true
sister,
though. That's not
right,
true.
right. So that shift in my identity, I had to one day go, wait, this belief is not serving me. And a belief is just something we decided was true, right? So, how do I change this belief? And once I changed the belief that I actually was not born addicted to alcohol, I was not born addicted to drugs,
Right.
everything shifted, right? That part of me that locks on and gets obsessive can be my
It was
superpower,
just a
can be
coping
the most
mechanism to deal with your pain. That's all it
right,
was. That's
right.
it. That's
Yeah.
it.
And
Yeah.
there's so much freedom in that. So I want to go back. I want to ask you this. Because I'm such a big believer, and I know the way you write, you do the same. It's like you don't want to just give people ideas and have them consume and learn something and go on about their life and not actually implement it and change.
Yes.
So when we're trying to create a new brand, right? It's one thing to listen to this podcast and think, that's a great idea. And think about it for what, 30 seconds, maybe 20 minutes at the
It takes a little bit
most.
more work than that. I'm sorry.
Well, right, right. I know this. So that's what I'm asking because I'm always a big believer in like, let's give the people the exercises. What do they do on a daily basis? What does that process look like? What would you suggest?
First of all, what I like about this lady, Leah, Princess Leah, is that she proclaimed it publicly
Mhm.
in front of her peers. So I say, if we rebrand ourselves, we start off with our sphere of the inner circle of trust, and we share from now on. I want to embrace, live, behave, think like, in her case, like a princess. So because there's certain accountability when we do that, you
Mhm.
know. Um, I remember just a couple of years ago, something happened. I don't remember what it was. And my daughter, who's just a badass, is just an amazing, just incredible. She goes, Dad, that's not king energy. I've seen you do this dance with mom. That's not king energy. And I'm like,
Love that.
what? She goes, she didn't even, and I said, honey, you're right. That's not king energy.
Mm.
Because there's a Peter Pan aspect to me. I'm very playful, very boy-like, but sometimes, which is great, actually, a
Yeah.
childlike wonder that I have. Like I get excited about, but sometimes, you know, I would do something almost like a little sneaky and then ask for forgiveness later. And so she called me out on it. And I'm like, you're right. That is not king energy. You're totally right. So I had to go because she had the permission that she could call me out on stuff.
Mm.
So if we have a new brand, for example, and we share that with people that we trust, that we know that they love us, we also give them permission to say, you know what, when I'm not acting like a princess, call me out on it.
Yeah.
Like, and slowly as your brand grows and you get more practice and you get more feedback from the people that love you, it becomes second nature, and then you fully embrace your brand, and then you don't have to try that. But
Yeah.
initially, it takes some accountability, I think, from your support
Yes.
system.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could kind of, I always like to take things to the extreme. Imagine that. I'm such a, like, it's just my nature. But think about like a professional athlete, right? If you saw a professional athlete eating McDonald's, a lot of people, I mean, eating McDonald's every once in, well, eating McDonald's is not healthy ever, but eating bad every once in a while, I'm not saying we have to do that perfectly. But if his sphere of influence saw that, they would be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And you're usually, eating, ground beef and kale smoothies and all this
Right.
healthy stuff. And so it becomes, and I always tell people that that's why I love talking about identity and rooting yourself into that every morning on a daily basis, reminding, I always say you have to remind your mind. You have to remind
Oh,
your
I love
mind.
that. Can I borrow that? I'll give you
Yes,
credit for it, but I remind
absolutely.
your mind. Wow, I got to write that
Remind
down before I forget.
right, because society gets in the way. Our doubt gets in the way, our fear gets in the way. But remind your mind of who you are. And when you shift the identity, then all these habits automatically fall into place.
Automatic.
Everybody's trying to drink more water or walk more or work out more or do this. And I'm like, but you're so focused on the behavior. If you focus more on the identity, the behavior would change a lot easier. Yeah.
Exactly. You're spot on. Remind your mind. I got to remember that. I will remember
Remind.
that. I am
Yes.
remembering that. I have
The
received it. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So what I here's what I want to know. This happiness, right? You go into it in the book. It's it's not, it doesn't happen from everyone thinks like, oh, well, if everything kind of happens, just I always think of us as like a play director. Like, well, if they act the way I need them to act and this person stays put and this everything kind of comes into alignment, then I'll be happy.
No,
Not the case, right? That's
not the
not
case.
how happiness
That's not
happens.
how
It's an
happiness works. No.
inside job. So, can we go back to this for like, I don't even know, the next part of the podcast and just talk about your biggest takeaways, your biggest actions, your biggest kind of nuggets that you can give the audience and how to truly cultivate happiness in their life?
So first and foremost, has to be self-care, self-love. That's a non-negotiable. Um, and I had to learn that the hard way because when I was younger, I was not practicing that. Especially when I was a psychologist, I was, working morning, noon, and night.
Yeah.
I found out when I retired from psychology that the typical psychologist lasts 10 years before they get burned out. And if
Wow.
they see 20 to 25 patient hours per week, that's considered full time. I
I
did it for
bet.
18 years, 18, and I would see 45 patient hours a week, every week. My wife was like, "You're going to have a heart attack." I'm like, "No, I
Yeah.
can handle it." Very ego driven. I'm like, "I can handle anything."
Yeah.
And I did for the first 16
We're a
years until
lot alike.
I know, but I was like, I did it for 16 years and then I hit the wall,
Yep.
physically hit the wall. And I've shared this story before, but when you have enough pain in your life, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, eventually you get down on your knees,
Yeah.
which I did because I was having pains. I was like, man, my pain was not psychosomatic. And I'm like, God, why is this happening to me? And my answers always are very short. Like whatever answers I download
Yeah.
from the spirit
Yep.
or your higher self or your intuition, whatever you call that voice, crystal clear, but short. And the answer was, Elia, I'm trying to take you in a different direction. You're not listening to me.
Mm,
Now, this is the sad part. You know what I did with that advice? I ignored it
mm.
because I was like in my ego. I was like,
I was gonna
I'm the
say
doctor. I make all this money. I have this, I'm like, I have this perfect life, basically. I'm like professional. I'm like, I'm crushing it.
I have this perfect life that's falling apart.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And although my body's telling me you're not listening to me.
Right.
So this is one of the few absolutes in life. That voice, that still small voice that you have to get quiet sometimes to hear it. Every time I've listened to that voice and I've acted on it, it has always worked out. Always. Not 99%, 100%. However, especially this example, sometimes, especially when I was younger, you hear it and you ignore it. So when you ignore that voice, guess what happens to your life? Does it get better or worse?
That voice gets louder and more painful.
And more, so exactly. Now, fast forward 6 more months. Now I'm really in a lot of pain, and it happens a lot more frequently. I'm in and out of hospitals. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with me, but there's something wrong.
Mm,
Now I'm really desperate and more humble, I guess, in some ways,
yeah.
because pain will do that to you. Now I'm back. Okay, why is this happening? It's been a year now of like in and out. And Elia, I told you before, I'm trying to take you in a different direction. You're not listening to me.
Mhm.
I want you to spread the light to a lot more people. Now that is a very interesting statement. Like, and I'm like, and my brain was like, okay, well, how do I make money doing that? Okay,
Yeah.
like I'm thinking like I have a family to provide
Absolutely.
for.
That's what would be my question.
I mean, I'm not. But then came the kicker. There was the third and the last sentence was this. And if you don't, I'm calling you home by the
Oh,
time you're 50. My mom
wow.
died when she was 51. So 50 for me was not this unreasonable time to die.
Yeah.
And that was what I needed to snap out of it. So I went and told my wife, I said, honey, I got to shut down my practice. I can't do it anymore because this is what's going to happen to me.
And not cut back, but shut down.
Yeah, but you can't do it overnight because I had a huge practice and you
Yeah.
can get sued for abandonment. So I had to have
Right.
an attorney. I mean, there's a process you have to do, but I gave myself 9 months. Stop taking any new referrals. Eventually, as my practice started to shrink a little bit, no more people on the wait list. I took Fridays off as self-care days. But unfortunately, it was too late for my body. Even though I was working less, the stress, the accumulated stress over 18 years and everything I had heard, it finally sidelined me. And in a specific, like I was doing marriage counseling with a couple, and I was looking at the clock. I was in so much pain, and I'm like 20 more minutes, 15 more minutes. Like I was counting that until I
Wow.
And I must have looked so bad, Moira, that they stopped the therapy session, and
Wow.
said, Dr. Elia, you don't look good. We're going to leave now. You need to take care of yourself. And I was like, no, 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 no. But I'm like, no, no, no. You really need to. They leave. I kind of literally crawled around my office and threw up from pain, physical
Oh
pain.
my gosh.
And my wife heard me. I had a home office. She comes downstairs. She goes, you look really bad, honey. We need to go to urgent care. Now, typically, my Greek macho side would have been, no, no, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
But that voice that I'm talking to you about said,
Yeah.
Elia, you need to go to there now. So she literally lifted me up. Anyway, we go there, they do all kinds of testing, and they're like, we can't help you here. You got to go to the emergency room now. Because I was getting jaundiced,
Wow.
and when I was a kid in Greece, I had hepatitis.
Hmm.
So when you turn yellow, that's not
Yeah.
good,
Not good.
right? Anyway, without boring the gory details, 6 nights in the hospital, 6 days,
Whoa.
two surgeries, emergency.
Whoa.
When I came out and the doctor told me what happened to me physically, he said, listen, first of all, it's a good thing you came in, because had you waited a day or two, if your liver shuts down, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing we can do about it. Like you're exiting. So then, when you have like 6 nights and everybody leaves and you're all alone, even though you're on morphine and you got all the nurses are coming in and out, you have a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I never want to feel this way again. I never want to be here again, ever. So I asked my surgeon, I said, why did this happen to me? I need to, what's the lesson here? He goes, either excessive drinking, and I don't really drink, or excessive stress. So what
Oh.
had happened for 18 years, all the horrible things that I had heard, the dark stuff, there's a lot of
Yeah.
dark stuff. On the surface, I was happy-go-lucky and
Yeah.
everything was good. But I stored everything in my gut, and my gut
Mhm.
started to eat itself.
Wow.
It took me 6 months to recover physically after that.
What was the
And
diagnosis?
well, they took out my gallbladder, the first surgery. They took out my bile duct was all like full of crap, basically. He came in the second time, but I had what he called a stenosis, which means that things have closed off. So my gallbladder wasn't working, my bile duct was like full of crap, and the liver processes our toxins.
Right.
But when that closes off, the toxins can't go through.
Yeah.
So the liver fought for several days to try to do that. At some point, it got overwhelmed, and then my liver started to shut down. That's why I turned yellow. I started jaundice, and that's why he said your liver was shutting down. And yes,
Wow.
your liver can rejuvenate itself actually and grow after. That's why it took 6 months afterwards. But once it shuts down, you're done.
Yeah.
So I made a promise to myself, never again. This will never happen to me again. I said, Elia, you're not walking the talk like you claim you do. You talk about self-love and self-care and so on, but you were working like a maniac for all those years. Skip
Mhm.
breakfast, skip lunch or fast food or something, eat late, go to bed. And that's why your body finally said enough is enough. I kid you not, I'm 20 chronological years older than then, and I'm healthier physically, emotionally,
Wow.
mentally, and spiritually. I'm healthier because self-care is a non-negotiable. And people
Yeah.
say, isn't self-care somewhat selfish? I'm like, yes, do more.
Right.
You
Right.
double down on that. So
Yes.
that's number one in terms of happiness.
Oh,
If you
and
don't
what a
practice self-care,
powerful, powerful, powerful story.
yeah, but don't be like me, a
Right.
knucklehead, and listen to that spirit. Don't ignore it like I did. I made a mistake, big
Yeah.
mistake. It almost cost
Yeah.
my life. So that's the second thing. We all know that having an attitude of gratitude
Mhm.
contributes to our well-being. It's actually the easiest way to go from being sad, depressed in a state of gratitude. We all know that. And it's easy to be grateful when things are going well. However, I believe we're all graduates from the University of Adversity.
Yes.
You and I have been there.
Yes.
And the older we get, the more adversity we have faced in life. So the higher the degree.
Mm.
So then the question is, can you really be grateful, honestly, in the midst of adversity?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
I can for sure. It's actually my default.
And Nelson Mandela, who's one of my heroes, said something so profound years ago. He said, "In life, either you win or you learn."
Yeah.
So when it comes to adversity, you and I have accomplished certain good, wonderful things in our lives. I'm sure that our greatest lessons, however, have never come from our successes. They've come from what at the time appeared
Absolutely. As
mistakes,
failures. Yeah.
failures, human frailties,
Yeah.
setbacks, weaknesses, and so on. And it's only when you look back and you say, you know what? Now I know exactly why that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be the person I am today had that. what at the time appeared to be catastrophic even
Yeah.
hadn't happened.
Oh,
So
so
be
good.
grateful in the adversity.
Yeah. And that reminds me so much of, again, what you say in the book that I can't remember. It was happiness is success, success is happiness. That truly, and as financially driven as you and I both are, because I don't ever think there's anything wrong with needing, wanting, financial
Of course.
freedom and all of that. But to understand that truly, true success is happiness. True success is having the ability to be positive in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of hardship. I mean, having that part of my being that could never be taken away from me, it might be challenged, but it can't be taken away from me, is way more valuable than any stock I own or real estate I own or anything else, right? And so we have to realize that everything that we want that's outside of ourselves, right? We want the car, we want the promotion, we want the bank account. It's all because we think it's going to give us a feeling.
Right.
And we can actually go get that feeling right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think the other part has to do with forgiveness, because I think forgiveness is a huge aspect of one's happiness, and especially self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
I think that's really and speaking about addicts, when I have
Yeah.
so many clients, when they, let's say they have a year of sobriety, it was the exit interview, let's call it that way. And I
Yeah.
would ask them at their last interview, I'm like, you've been sober, you're doing so good, you're thriving, your life is completely turning your life around. Do you think your spouse has forgiven you? Yes. Your kids? Yes. Your boss, whatever, significant other, and so on. How about yourself? Have you forgiven yourself?
Mm.
The best answer that I got, not the most common, the best answer was, I'm working on it. That was the
Yeah.
best answer. The most common answer was, of course, no.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, we have a little bit more work that we need
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Because carrying
Because,
shame there's nothing that will hold you back more in life than the
and to me,
cloak of shame.
yeah, self-forgiveness is the greatest act of self-compassion.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. And we
And
talk about that in the steps, right? When we're asking forgiveness. And I don't
yes,
even know because I have been sober for decades. I don't know if this was spoken about way back then, but I certainly hear it spoken about more now is that we need to be first on our amends list, which seems so
no, that
backwards.
wasn't true back then. No, this
Yeah.
is new.
Yeah,
That
and
wasn't the case back then. No,
it's so important because I was just talking about this recently. It's like, when I can look back, you said hindsight's 2020. When I can look back and see all of a sudden kind of this shift in from the outside perspective looking in, the success, the accolades, the stages, best selling this, 1% that. What really happened was I dropped the cloak of shame, right? I stepped into my God given power and purpose. And you can't do that when you're carrying guilt and shame.
you
You just
can't.
can't.
And self-forgiveness, um, and I have a process I take
I
my
was just
clients
going to
through.
say,
It,
what's the
it,
how here?
yeah,
How do
the
we
how
do this?
here, the how, and it's not that hard actually. So I'll use you as an example.
Yeah.
Moira, I want you to write down all the things you haven't forgiven yourself for. It could be 5 things, 10 things, 50 things, whatever it is, just bullet points. Bup, 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 bup. When you're done, I want you to assign a number next to each one of them. A 10 on the forgiveness aspect would be you actually murdered somebody, like you physically killed a human being. That's a
Right.
10. So
Yeah.
let's put things in perspective. A 1 is, well, you spilled some milk at the restaurant and it was kind of embarrassing because it's all over your shirt. That's a 1.
Got it.
Right? And that's how I do. And now we begin. We start with the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, which are the easiest ones, the lowest hanging fruit. And then as people gain confidence in their
Yes.
forgiveness, right, then we move that to the 5, 6s, and 7s, and the higher ups. And that's how you do it. And then when we're done, we actually have that piece of paper. I burn it in front of
Ah,
with my client.
I love
And as
that.
the smoke goes up to the heavens, I'm like, you know what the beautiful thing is? When they exit my office, they're like, Dr. Elia, I feel like 1,000 pounds have been lifted off of me, or 100 pounds, or whatever. And every single one of them has said, I wish I had done that sooner in my life.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, as a side note, this is kind of funny. Alpha males, for the most part, maybe you may be an alpha female, but I can tell you one thing: alpha males,
Yeah.
the first, because I work with a lot of CEOs, and I had the first guy that said to me when I explained this the process, and he had done, he goes, "That's not how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start with my 10s." And I'm like, and I had never heard of that before. I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Oh yeah." because if I can do my tens, everything else is easier after that,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a different way. Frankly, I don't care which way people go. As long as you
Right.
do the exercise, it doesn't matter to me which way
Yes,
you go.
yes. I totally understand though, flexing the muscle, building the confidence. I don't think many people can.
I
But
know.
also, the second you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I might do that too.
Yeah. I
Let's
mean,
just
it really, the
tackle
whole
the
point is to do it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's because forgiveness equals freedom.
Yes.
Or like
Yes.
Gandhi once said, forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. It does take courage to do it, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
I think kindness, we already talked about it. I think kindness is an important aspect of happiness.
Mhm.
Happy
Yes.
people do kind things all the time and consciously and mindfully. And
Mhm.
but there's one other aspect that I want to cover, which is and this could be a whole different interview. It has to do with relationships.
Mm.
Because let's say I practice self-care, I practice gratitude on a daily basis. I am a kind human being. I know my purpose and I live it. And I feed my spiritual self and so on. And I have forgiven myself. Let's say I've done, those are the 6 out of the 7 paths. But if I surround myself with toxic people, it's very, very difficult to maintain your health and your happiness, even if you do a
Yes.
lot of those things.
Yeah.
And I come to you and I proclaim this publicly. I have no toxic relationships in my life, and I haven't had that for years.
Yeah.
People don't believe it at first, like, oh, come on, surely you're like, no, I don't. Because I made a conscious decision when I came out of the hospital, like never again.
Never again.
So I take people through a process. This is the how-to part, and it's not that hard actually. So this is the how-to part for relationships. It always what matters is how I show up. Me. It starts with the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror.
Hmm.
If I show up with you, Moira, and I treat you with love, kindness, and respect, right?
Yeah.
So this is the conversation would be like this. Do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect for the most part? You would
Yes.
say, yes, you
Yes.
do. Okay, now I have every right to expect that you, in return, will treat me with love, kindness, and respect.
Yes.
Isn't that fair?
Yeah.
In
Yes.
other words, I can't be a jerk and expect you to be loving, kind, and respectful. So it starts with us. But as long as we show up in a certain manner with love, kindness, and respect towards others, it's okay for us to expect that in return. And if the other person won't do that, yeah, and of course, I've gotten kickback from people like, well, what if it's a member of your family? I'm
Yeah.
like, of course it's a member of your family, at least one, maybe two
Yes.
people in your family.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's always a member of your family.
But they're like, well, what if you can't divorce them or cut them loose completely? Because some people, I cut them loose completely, you're out.
Yeah.
But let's say it is a member of your family. Somebody
Yep.
say, listen, we have three options here. One, no relationship.
Hmm.
None of us want that. Two, we will have a very, very superficial relationship, which is Merry Christmas, Happy
Yes.
Hanukkah, Happy New Year, Happy Birthday. How's the weather in New York? Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Or if we want to have a deep and profound relationship, it has to be under these conditions, which means that
Yeah.
you will have to treat me with the same love, kindness, and respect I treat you. And if you don't, then you're going to have a 6 month timeout.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
give you a 6 months to think about it.
Mm.
And then if you come back, we'll try it again. And if you start being toxic and disrespectful to me, you get another 6 month timeout
Yeah.
until you finally get it
Right.
that I'm in
Right.
business.
Consequences
So
and boundaries, which is so
ex-
important in relationships. Yeah.
that's it. And that's how you deal with toxic relationships at work,
Yeah.
at home, in your extended families.
Mm.
Um,
So
yeah,
good.
so that's
So
it.
good.
But it's true though.
It's so
And the last
true.
thing I want to say to you is, and to your audience, do not procrastinate your happiness.
Mm. Yeah.
We all live, or most people live in the whens. When I'm in the right relationship, when I have enough money, when I have kids, or when I have family, or when my kids grow up, when my kids get married, when I retire, when. One of the greatest things about the pandemic, it taught us, and certainly taught me, there are no guarantees about anything. Live your best life now and do not procrastinate your happiness. Invest in your best life today. Period.
Today.
That's it.
Ah, so good. I mean, I feel like you just gave us like 30 years of all of your best stuff in one podcast episode. So many takeaways, so many applicable, actions to actually put into your life, which I love more than anything. I cannot
Thank
thank
you.
you enough. I know that we could literally talk for 3 more hours. So maybe we'll have you back on the show to dive deeper down some of those topics. I would love that. I know we both have other calls to get to, unfortunately.
But I have a surprise for you. This is my
Oh,
last thing. This is a surprise.
for
That's a
me, this
surprise.
is usually the other way around. What's the
No, I have a
surprise?
surprise for you. So 2 days ago, I signed a contract with the Mental Health Television Network, which is an amazing organization. You need to get to know these people,
Okay.
mhtn.org. Anyway, to have my own television show.
What?
I haven't even so
Amazing.
it's not even out on social media yet. This is I'm telling you, like my family knows. So I'm telling you right now, it's okay to share it. Like it's okay because
Yeah, and this won't
it,
drop for a couple weeks.
yeah, that's fine. By then it'll be out on social media. Okay, so it's going to be called the Happy Hour with Dr.
Oh
Elia.
my God. That's the most perfect name ever. I can't believe nobody else has done that
I
yet.
know.
I
Well,
mean,
that's my name now. Okay, so and I have 26 episodes, season one, and then the other 26 weeks they're going to rerun it, and then the option was season two. I would, and so I have 26 badass guests.
oh my
I'm
gosh.
accumulating
Uh,
the list right now, from
Amazing.
celebrities to professional athletes to influencers or people who have had, their own challenges in life and
Yeah.
overcoming them and are thriving and living great lives,
Mm.
just like yourself. So I'm putting you on the spot, I know, but would you be willing to be one of my guests?
Oh my gosh. I would love nothing more. Nothing more. Thank you. Yes, 100%. I will bring all the fire, all the
I
passion,
know you will.
everything.
I had a feeling before we got on the call, Dave, but I'm like, even before we went live, when I got to see
Yeah.
who you are, I don't know crap about technology, but I read people like an X-ray. I
Same.
read you, Moira, in 30 seconds. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow,
Energy, right? Energy is everything.
you are such a powerful woman. You're such a
Oh,
powerful human,
thank
and
you.
your heart is so big.
Thank you.
And I recognize because my heart is really big too. I mean,
I know.
we have some
It's
things in
it's like
common,
a
you and me.
match. There's a match here on so many levels, and I mean my cheeks are hurting. I'm smiling so big because I felt the same way. I mean probably not even 30 seconds, but when we both popped on camera,
So
there
it
was
would
a
be my
connection.
honor if you would come on my TV show. Would you?
I would be beyond honored. Thank you so much for the
Thank you.
invitation. I so appreciate that.
My people will be in touch with your people, as they say.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. Oh my gosh. Dr. Elia, thank you for your
You're welcome.
wisdom. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your spirit. This has been such a gift today for me, and I know everyone listening. So, listeners, make sure that you tag both of us, share this episode with somebody that would derive value from it. I think the whole world would derive value from it. Go
And
ahead.
connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Just like connect. I'm big about connecting. So would
Yes.
love to hear your feedback also, of course.
Yes, I love that. That doesn't surprise me one little bit that you want to connect with the audience. I love to connect with the audience. So, again, Dr. Ilya, thank you so much for your time. And, audience, we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Oh my